In the previous video, we implemented the reduced tax rate, both for items under 100 euros taxed at 9% and for items over 100 euros taxed at 13.5%. But we're still missing the zero tax rate and the default tax rate. Let's have a look at how to do these. Now, the tests we have been writing have been quite repetitive. It's basically the same thing with slightly different data. So I've refactored our test class to use a JUnit parameterized test that we can see here. A JUnit parameterized test runs the same test case over and over again with different rows of test data. Each row of test data in this array makes up a separate test case. The first row is our case of 1 packet of crisps. The second row is our case of 50 packets of crisps. When we run this, these variables will be injected into these member variables, these member fields, for quantity, name, category, and so forth. They all correspond to the columns in this table. And when we run the test, we can use the quantity, the name, the category, and so forth inside our test because it will have been instantiated by JUnit each time. If I run this test, I'll see a different test result for each row. And as you can see, we have one row for the crisps, one set of crisps, another row for the 50 sets of crisps, both of which pass. So all we need to do to add a test for the zero tax rate is to add a new row here. Now, books are rated 0. So we can have one pet book called Training Dogs. It is in the category of books. And in fact, we don't really care how much it is, but we're going to say it's 5 euros. And as for the results, we want it 0% because it's a 0 rate tax item. And we'll have 0 in the label, and the actual amount, the total amount, should also be 0. Now I'm going to run this test again and see what happens. And this time the test fails, and the test fails because this last one is using a reduced rate instead of a 0 rate. And that's what we need to make work. We make the choice about what tax calculator we should use in the sales tax service class, or more specifically in the tax rate for method. Here at this point we've hard coded the reduced rate calculator, but we don't want this. We want to be able to choose the correct one. The correct way to find out what tax calculator we should use is to look at the product category. In the product category, we have things like medicine, books, which are taxed at 0%. We have snacks and soft drink, which would be taxed at the reduced rate, and everything else would be taxed at the normal rate. So one easy thing we could do in the sales tax service is to add a map, which will map product category to the tax calculator we need to use. So let's add a map. It's a map from product. It's a map from product category to tax rate calculator. And it will tell us what tax rate calculator we should use for a particular product category. And we can instantiate this in a static block. The reduced rate tax applies to snacks and soft drinks. So all we need to do to cater for reduced rates is to add these entries into our map. In the tax rate for method, we can now use the map to determine what rate calculator we have to use. We get the rate calculator from the map based on the category, and then we find the rate for that item and giving it the item, and this becomes our entire method. Back in our test case, we should be able to run these tests again and have the same result. The first two tests will pass, the ones related to the reduced rate, and the last one will fail. So we haven't broken anything. Our next job is to make this work for books. And the good news is this is really easy, because all we need to do is add another line to our table that caters for books. Unfortunately, the reduced rate calculator won't work anymore, so we're going to need a new one. We're going to need a zero rate calculator. Let's implement that. This method simply returns a zero tax rate. Now let's run the test again and see if it passes. And we have it passing. The other zero rated category is medicine. So let's add an entry for medicine. So we will sell some pills. It will be category medicine, and it should be again zero rated. If I run this test again, we should have a fail because we haven't catered for medicine in the zero rated category. Let's see if our guess is correct. And yes, we have a failing test. And once again, all we need to do to make this category pass is to add the medicine category into our map for the zero rated calculator. And now our test should pass. I'm going to run the test again, and now all four tests pass. Let's add another category for toys. Now toys are at our standard rate, so I'm going to have a rubber bone. I've just added the toy category, so a rubber bone for our dog. It costs 10 euros. It's a standard product, so it's taxed at 23%, so the tax should be 230. So I'm going to run this test, and we can see that the rubber bone fails. Let's go into our code and see how we could implement this. Now we could add another entry here. We could add an entry for every standard calculator, standard product, but there are quite a lot of them. Another thing we could do is, rather than saying get here, we could say get or default. And then the default will be a standard rate tax calculator. So if an entry is in the map, we'll get the rate calculator based on the entry. If not, we'll get the standard one. Let's create that class and implement the method. And we're just going to return a 23% standard tax rate. Let's run these tests once again. And we have a passing test. So let's resume how we solve this problem. Let's go through this code once more to see how we've implemented the strategy pattern here. To calculate the sales tax for a particular item, we call sales tax entry for that item on the sales tax service. Now the sales tax service has to calculate the rate calculator that it's going to use to figure out what the rate is. So this bit of code figures out what rate calculator it should use. It can get the rate calculator from one of two places. It gets it either from the map structure, which we've defined up here, or it will use the standard rate calculator if no entry in the map has been found. Using a map is a nice declarative way of you implementing the strategy pattern, and it's something you see quite a lot. In the next section, we'll have a look at how we can use Java 8 features like Lambda to implement strategy patterns.